There is one particular situation among spiritual seekers in this country which I have been coming across ever since I came to this country last year, and it was most poignantly brought home to me again yesterday when I had been on a brief visit to Los Angeles, and that is a total bewilderment of mind, confusion of issues arising from listening to many teachers, reading too many books, trying to follow all at a time, and ultimately finding oneself very much where one started from, and being in the danger of losing faith in the existence of a way to reach the divine. There was a gentleman who I met last time who was extremely receptive as I was talking. He couldn't control his emotions, and from his general deportment I could see that his was the way of devotion. He sought me out after the talk was over and asked me whether I could guide him. I excused myself from assuming any position of responsibility on so brief an acquaintance. But I listened to what he had to say, and he told me, so and so says like this, so and so says differently. Then I said, leave all those things aside. You are an individual and an awakened individual. Your way is clear, and this is where you start. You don't need to go to anyone. You read that type of literature that helps your aspiration, that melts your emotions, that refines your consciousness, and whatever your religious persuasion, you are bound to go far, for your sincerity is evident. He assured me that he would follow that, and I had assumed that all was well. This time, the same gentleman met me with a woe-begone expression and said, I am confused. Nityananda says one thing, another person says another thing, another man says raise Kundalini, another man says dismiss, kill your mind. All these, he said, I do not know what to do. I could not satisfy him there in that brief period. So I have asked him to meet me at leisure. But I have seen this disabling experience catching hold of many here, very sincere people. Maybe some of them immature, but still sincere. In spiritual life, we have a tradition of being like a bee. You are like a bee going from flower to flower, collecting honey from all sides. But a stage comes when that bee has to be in one place and enjoy what it has collected. You cannot spend all your time in roving from person to person, teaching to teaching. It will lead nowhere. Add to the confusion. This is not to say that this or that teaching is not right, but whether every teaching is right for everyone. That's the question. One has first to know what is to be one's goal. What goal I set for myself in my life. There we do not need anybody's help. Our instinctive aspiration, which is a result of the past evolution, and the nature of temperament, svabhava, that indicates what is to be your goal. You want to realize a perfect consciousness, full of knowledge, or you want to dissociate yourself, liberate yourself, and arrive at peace, or cancel yourself in some nirvana, or become a center of divine light, radiating that splendor around in the world. So this goal has to be first decided. It is a distant goal, but that goal has to be there. And once that distant goal has been fixed, there are a number of intermediate goals. And the intermediate goals are to be decided according to the path that one chooses. And here one has to get advice, guidance from someone who is more knowledgeable, who has more experience, who has more light and more humility. Once you feel that path has certain affinity to you, it is an indication that is your starting point. Other paths may meet you on the way, but you start with the point of departure with which you are in affinity of being. If we keep these principles in mind, we can meet anybody. Take from him just what is relevant to our purpose and integrate every helpful idea, every helpful experience with our one-pointed effort. But the dependence has to be on ourselves, on the light that leads us. Everything else is contributory. The mind has to be disciplined. It must learn to think in focus, not in a haphazard, distracted way. Now jumping at one idea, now flying at another. That way one will never arrive. This plethora of teachings, approaches, practices is there everywhere, not only in America. In every country there are these presentations. But we are mature people with a certain choice. None should be able to impose on us. We have to exercise the choice. I thought this was simple enough. But it needs to be said again and again. Once you fix your path, your goal, your path, your approach, and you know what are the stages through which you have to develop yourself, that should be your main concern. Everything else can be contributory. You just dismiss other things as irrelevant to you. They may be right, they may be true for others, but to me they are not relevant. If I am called upon to give a hearing, it can be only a respectful hearing, nothing more. I will not presume to go and correct others, saying that this is not right, this is right, what I say is right. No, that will be presuming too much. The reality is multiple, many-faceted, and there are, in a sense, as many paths as there are individuals. With these observations, I take up the next theme in our discussion of the philosophy of spiritual practice. We have, during the last week, discussed Hatha Yoga, the culture of the body for attaining the highest consciousness that the body can hope for. Raja Yoga, the culture of the mind to attain a state of oneness with the self, absolute immobility of mental consciousness, so that in the pure waters of the mind, the luminous self reflects itself. We have also briefly considered the shortcomings of these two paths as far as the modern world situation is concerned, and the demands upon man by the time spirit. Today, we take up the philosophy of the yoga of love. There are three paths, of which I have chosen to start with the yoga of love, yoga of devotion. In his celebrated aphorisms on devotion, Narada, a name held in great reverence in the East as a divine singer who always chants the glory of God in the seven spheres of existence, who was originally a human being like you and I, who has achieved perfection, achieved godhood, and shines as an eternal guide. Passing from heaven to earth with a facility with which we go from one chamber to another. He defines devotion in his very first aphorism as ahaituki bhakti, that is, love without cause. Human love has always a cause, attraction, expectation, and other things. But for God, real devotion is where it has absolutely no cause. even the devotion for purposes of achieving liberation is not pure devotion. It is a loaded devotion. This is his definition of pure devotion. Now in man, there are three divine powers, namely will, knowledge and love. And corresponding to these three powers in man, there are three paths leading him to union with God. In life, as we see, as we live, action is the first force. Works, activity. And by activity, by movement, we come to know the principles of things, the truth of things. And as this knowledge grows, understanding of the reality, of the truth grows, there wells up a devotion, a love for that object of knowledge. And this knowledge is really the foundation of constant living in the divine. Because consciousness, awareness is the foundation of all living and being. And knowledge is the action of consciousness. Action is the first principle because even knowledge is only the movement, the action of consciousness. The divine reality meets us in several aspects. In the aspect of knowledge, in the aspect of will, in the aspect of love. But knowledge, understanding what he is, what the reality is not complete unless that knowledge is translated into works. It remains a theoretical acquisition without any impact on life, on the consciousness of the person concerned, unless he allows that knowledge to govern and shape the activity in which he is engaged. And the crown of this knowledge is love. When you begin to know more and more, you identify yourself with it. Knowledge opens the door. What we know to be the ultimate truth, we begin to love. Love without knowledge is blind, just as knowledge without love is dry. It is just philosophy. Delight is the nature of consciousness. I said, knowledge is the action of consciousness. Delight is the nature of consciousness. If we don't feel that delight, though we have consciousness, normally it is because we are not in full possession of our consciousness. We are still playing on the surface shores of the ocean of consciousness. We have not yet stepped into the waters. It is only to the extent that we awake to the existence of this illimitable consciousness embodied in ourselves, that we begin to feel something of that bliss, some ray of that joy. It comes through the heart as an uncaused sweetness. Not the joy which brings excitement and agitation, not the joy which thrills and makes you disorder. That's the joy of the vital, that is, the life energy's pulsations, tied to desire. But this bliss, which is the nature of consciousness, which you begin to feel as you near the inner levels of consciousness, that is something uncaused, unique, sweet, with the peace around it. The bliss of God always carries that stamp of peace. When it is pure, it is like a still ocean. It is only when it is mixed with our psychological, emotional, or egoistic vibrations that there is a effervescence, a bubbling. Now this delight being the nature of consciousness, love is the key and secret of the acme of delight. One can reach this delight through love. Love is the key. Love, even in our world, is the recognition of the self in this body, of the self in the other body. It is because there is this one self extended everywhere. When it recognizes or greets itself in another form, there is that attraction of the surface, that kind of mutual affinity. It is only an indication. It is said in one of our ancient Upanishads, one does not love the wife for sake of the wife, but for the sake of the self. One does not love one's son for sake of the son, but for the sake of the self. This has been wrongly translated by scholars. Instead of having the concept of the capital self, they have understood it as the normal desire self. So they have, made a parody of the real profound idea that each one loves for selfish reasons. Really one doesn't have a love for son or a wife, but for one's own selfish purpose. But certainly this doesn't need to be said by a great rishi or a seer. It is a fact of normal egoistic existence. But to be set in that frame of spiritual text, it has reference to that divine self, which is at the root of all existence, at the source of all good, and that self is one in all. But by our egoistic consciousness, barriers of ego, ignorance, we live in division. That is the real form. Yesterday, there was someone who seriously thinks he is Jesus Christ. He and his son were present in a meeting. And they asked me, according to you, what's the real meaning of the Garden of Eden and the serpent coming and man eating the fruit of the knowledge of the tree of knowledge? What does it indicate? The symbolism is clear. At a stage in the beginning, we were all one with God. A state in which man is conscious of his innate unity with God. Somehow, he eats the fruit of ignorance, forgets that unity, and there is division. This sense of division and separativity from God is the real fall of man. Serpent, it has many significances. But in that context, it is the energy of nature. A beautiful, bright serpent with a jewel on its hood, it indicates a spiritual energy. But the serpent, as is described in these texts, it is an energy of nature. Nature tempts man to regard himself as independent. He accepts the suggestion and he falls from his sense of unity. Love takes the reverse course, and love leads from the suffering of division into the bliss of perfect union. Because the first step of love is to give yourself, to refuse to maintain a separate identity. You want to immerse, join, unite, and become one with the object of your love. So love is the key. Life is a paradox with love for its key. Even for God's sake. Love is the lien of gods on man. Love is the hook by which God lifts up man from his morass. It is the greatest power. Not knowledge, not will, but love gives the direct root and acts as a direct link with the divine. That is why love is looked upon as the key to the gates of heaven. And there is this joy of the act of union. Once you unite with God, it brings as a consequence an acme of joy in which one completely forgets oneself. And that is sheer identity of man. All the barriers, hesitations, all dissolved at the acidic touch of love. And when you love, you begin to know what you love. The more you love, the more you know. So love brings knowledge, and knowledge is necessary. Though you may start with love, at some stage the light of knowledge is indispensable, because love without knowledge has been found, though intense, it tends to be blind, rude, narrow. My religion, my God, my prophet, to death everyone who does not subscribe. But I am very passionate in my loyalty to my beloved God. And I will not tolerate anybody else worshipping any other God. This is blind love. The soldiers, the warriors who fought in the battle of the Crusades honestly believed that they were serving God in killing their brethren for not subscribing to their faith. Therefore, the intensity of love needs the light of knowledge to back it up. Love leads to knowledge. Love also leads to works. Activity, works for God, God in the universe. Love throws itself joyfully into divine works. A true love is not content to pour itself into the one God, either within or above. It also recognizes this multiple variation in the manifestation of God. And it insists on what we may call a multitudinous love for God. Love God in every circumstance, every condition, in every form that is before you, as God everywhere. So we have not only a unitary love for God, but a multitudinous love for God. It is necessary, when we have this approach, that there is no mutual depreciation of the exponents or the protagonists of one path or of other paths. They are all rooted in one being. They are three diverse powers, but all originating from one and culminating also into one. So this mutual depreciation, lowering of others, is inadmissible. Love purifies and enlarges as much as knowledge does. There need be no contradiction between knowledge and love. If knowledge purifies through ascesis and enlarges by extending your consciousness, forcing you to accept larger and larger horizons, love also insists on increasing purification. Everything that is not dear to the Lord, everything that is not consistent with pure love, that is eliminated. And there is a joyful purification in love. In other paths, purification may be attended by a certain regret for what we shed from us. But in the yoga of love, it is a moment of joy to give up something which is vitiating, which stands in the way of complete surrender, complete consecration to God. And the very fact that in loving, you give up your moorings in your individual egoistic self and go out, shows that the moment of enlargement has begun. As I said, you love one, you love another, you love God, and you love God in all. What starts as a small circle goes on extending itself till it embraces the whole ocean of creation. And there is always this conflict between the intellect and the heart. It is true that by knowledge one can reach to heights undreamt of by man. Knowledge takes us to high summits of existence, of rarefied life, where you live in a transcendent consciousness. But where there is only knowledge, you miss the depths of existence. You miss the profundities of life. And the heart always plunges into the deeps of existence and gives a depth to love. When you are high above the world. You also need a certain depth. So the ideal approach is to suffuse knowledge with the sap of love and to add to love the light of knowledge, so that you feel and embrace the divine in all dimensions, missing nothing, possessing everything. We have to say these things because whether in the East or the West, it is customary, fashionable to decry love as a sentiment, emotions as the play of nature, of ignorant people. It is only when one rises above these eddies and currents and one becomes serene, detached, aloof, that one is supposed to be on the threshold of the divine. It is to correct this error of one-track mind. Most of our minds are one-track minds. We have yet to develop a total outlook, a whole perspective in which the look of the mind can embrace everything. The movement of specialization has led to a certain fragmentation of knowledge. Time has come now to change the direction and have a movement of synthesis, a movement of integration, and not of specialization. Specialization had its role, it has done its work. But now over specialization will limit us into microscopic limits. And with this understanding of the contributory roles of all the three, will, that is works, knowledge, the mind, that is knowledge, and the heart, which moves in love. We go to a deeper and a direct consideration of love. One of the reasons why the path of love is considered to be inferior is that love requires two. Worship, which is an expression of love, adoration, which is a movement of love, requires two: the human soul and the Lord or the divine. So this duality, this affirmation that there are two, is said to be not the complete truth, because the complete truth is one. That is why they say the way of worship, the way of adoration is inferior. The second reason that they give is, in the way of love, you have God as a person, the divine as a being. But they say the impersonal is higher than the personal, and personal form. But it is not so. And they say, if there is an impersonal reality, you can't love an impersonal. You can't love peace, you can't love bliss. You have to have a blissful being. You have to have a peaceful existent, not existence. So this is only a step. And sheer analysis and obliteration of all dualities and multiplicities, coming to the substratum of form, is the acme of knowledge. That is why they decry the path of God. But we have seen that the divine cannot be bound to our mental conceptions of oneness or many, of the personal or the impersonal. He is some thing that transcends these aspects. He holds the personal and the impersonal as two movements, the one and the many as two aspects. He cannot be defined in these terms. The Gita calls him the transcendent Purusha, the Supreme Person, who reconciles all oppositions, who subsumes all contraries. And how are you going to say that the path of knowledge is superior to the path of life? Now, in this yoga of devotion, you conceive of a power or powers higher than yourself. All religions start with this. From the primitive times, there is this conception that there are powers, one power greater than myself, larger than ourselves. And life being what it is, buffeted as we are by movements, circumstances which come upon us not only as a result of our own actions, but actions of others. And one begins instinctively to look to this power, to these powers for assistance, for help, for succor in the daily rounds of existence. And one worships that power. One allows one's emotions, prayers to pour towards that higher being, higher power. And that is why we worship. But worship is only the first step. It is for many an indispensable step. Because man lives largely on a sensational level, on a physical level. And he needs a physical form, a physical mold to pour his emotions. Physical worship gives a concreteness, a completeness to the movement of heart. The stage comes When this physical mold, physical expression is no longer necessary, worship builds what I would call an inner adoration. Always something in us adoring the divine, regarding the divine in everything, and always having a remembrance and an attitude of adoration. And that is real devotion. Inner adoration, an effortless adoration, spontaneous flow of feeling, consciousness, and waiting upon that grace, waiting upon that higher will, not demanding anything, but always being grateful to receive anything. That is inner adoration. And this inner adoration develops a certain intensity and melts into divine. But the thread running through all the three stages is the thread of love. Love. Now, I said, love gives depth to oneness. It gives intensity to oneness. And something more than that is, where there is difference, obvious, apparent differences, love returns on difference in oneness. It restores the oneness. It unites what was disparate, what was divided. And heart is found to be wiser than thought. Thought bisects, heart unites. That is why wisdom is here, knowledge is there. There is a difference between knowledge and wisdom. Wisdom indicates something, connotes something more than mental knowledge. It is the perception and the guidance of the soul which knows all, which feels all. Love is the language of the soul. And where love scores over thought is that thought always prefers to move in the abstract, to rarefy conceptions and play with abstractions. But the heart emphasizes on the concrete. Love wants things to be concretely experienced and felt. It shies away from abstractions. The ideal of the knower is too remote, too impersonal, and severely wrong for a common man, an awakened man. But love gives a concreteness, directness, and nearness. As we said, the divine is not bound to accept the definitions of the abstracting mind. It is difficult for the mind of knowledge to conceive of this multiplicity of the world as a manifestation of God. But for love, it is easy. It senses, it feels and responds to that presence in every individual form. It enjoys variation without losing the joy of unity. At a deeper level, it is one with the divine. But in action, in movement, it takes cognizance of variety, the multiplicity, and thus it embraces both unity and multiplicity, the one and the many, in its broadening sweep. I think we could break now and meet a little after 11. As I was saying, all religions conceive of a power greater and larger than ourselves, and in the midst of life, faced with the play of forces beyond his control, man looks to these powers. He develops obedience and starts worshipping these higher powers. And in the very act of obedience, worship, there is a gulf between man and God. So in the case of religions, there is always a gulf between the higher and the lower, between the divine and the human. But in yoga, that gulf is abolished, because yoga achieves or aims at achieving union, losing yourself in identity with the divine at a fundamental level of being. Whatever may be the functional status of variation, basically yoga achieves union, and there is no real gulf between man and God. Whether this yoga is a yoga of knowledge, you start on the path of knowledge and you arrive at the conception of God as your own highest self. You discover by discrimination, analysis, rejection of what is transitory and passing, acceptance of what is eternal and permanent, you come to a stage at the end when you discover that the permanent, that the eternal is your own self, either on the heights or in the depths. Similarly, even in the yoga of works, where you work, consecrate your energies to God by identification of your will with the divine will, you develop a kind of identity. And as it develops, there is an adoration of the Lord to whom you dedicate your works. This leads to a certain intimacy which culminates in union, and you feel that God Himself is working through you. The gulf is not there. In love, yoga of love, it is without saying that the acme is the delight of union. Whether devotion, how do we start? Everything in our life is based upon a motive. Lower desires, egoistic motives, mixed motives. It goes without saying that one can't have pure devotion, motiveless devotion from the very beginning. Even the desire for liberation, even the desire to reach God is a desire. But it is a higher kind of desire. It continues to be a desire as long as you want to realize God for your own purpose. You have to shift the emphasis. You love God, seek God for His own self. Not for achieving salvation for myself, but because you want Him. So we do yoga, not for our sake, but for sake of the divine. To fulfill His intention, to complete His manifestation. And in this, there is always a gradation. The Gita recognizes three kinds of devotees. One, those who are distressed, artha, distressed either inwardly or externally, and they crave for help. They crave for grace to get out of those difficulties. It is considered to be a legitimate mode. The second is what is called the artharth, a person who needs things, who wants things of the world, material things, psychological understandings, all things which man feels to be his legitimate field of activity. And he prays. He can pray. Prays for wealth, prays for facilities, prays for health. That too is a recognized and an accepted category of devotees. And the third is one who wants to know the divine. He has some idea from what he reads, from what he hears, but he wants to really know what is God. And he develops devotion for that purpose. That too is recognized. And the Lord says that the one who excels is the devotee who knows, not an ignorant devotion, not a devotion of awe, but a devotion which carries knowledge of the beloved with it. That is the highest type of knowledge. Ordinarily, you accept in life, you accept the normal mixed ego motives. As you develop, as your culture more and more, you elevate those desires into something larger, having reference to others. You give up your narrow, selfish base and move a little further, enlarging and elevating the older motives. And as you practice these higher motives, you become conscious of a certain imperative. You have to do because you have to. You do because you have to. There is no escape. And this imperative gradually leads to the self-existent. In the beginning, the lure of ego nature is allowed. The ego is pampered, allowed to have its say, and gradually once the ego accepts to work, once my ego accepts, yes, I want to be a spiritual man. I want to know, I want to have a spiritual power, I want to have love for God, for my own satisfaction. I will feel happy, I will feel blissful. You allow that. And once it starts working, you gradually elevate and substitute larger and universal motives for the narrow individual motives with which you started. And thereafter, there is a direct attraction, irrespective of other factors, other elements, and you come to what is called the pure devotion. Science, in its study of religions, emphasizes that all religions are traced to primitive feelings of fear. People are afraid and they want to bribe, they want to supplicate, they want to cry for mercy. And it is out of fear that religions are born, and as knowledge extends, religions will die. That is the approach of science, normal science. But really, all these religions have started not only out of fear, but also out of desire, out of interest. Life has a double movement, acquiring of what is considered to be desirable, averting what is considered to be undesirable and dangerous. So both fear and desire and interest play a great part in the formation and the development of religions. And in this context, God is looked upon as a power who is a dispenser of boons, giving what I want. And man conceives of this power in his own ego image. Just as he reacts to flattery, just as he frowns upon things that are unpleasant, he conceives God also as subject to propitiation and supplication. You would like to please him, give him things, say that he is the highest in all them, and he supposes that God will be pleased. If God is wrathful, he supplicates, he prays, and hopes for his mercy. Now it is a crude anthropomorphic figure in which God has been conceived for ages. The next stage, after this primitive stage passes, is you conceive of God in terms of justice. Not God who can be propitiated, who can be flattered into giving you what you want, but a stern justice who holds the scales of justice, giving you punishment for bad things that you're supposed to have done, and rewards for the good things that you do. And to avert the punishment, to draw rewards, there is prayer and propitiation. There is a certain moral law which man erects, and attributes it to God. God is subject to the moral law. God is not superior to the moral law. But God is conceived as an executor of a moral law. And there is always this awe of God. There is no question of love in the beginning. There is awe. There is fear, veneration. And one conceives that he is omniscient. He is omnipotent. 9/10 of religion, whichever religion, is this conception, conceiving of God in terms of moral law, a order of rewards and punishments, susceptible to praise and supplication. 9/10 of religion is this, and only 1/10 is the percolation of noble and profounder ideas of divine brought by a greater spirituality. That feature of religion is lost sight of by the common folk. It is only those who have advanced in their civilization, in their culture, that they note and pay attention to these ideas and ideals, unself-regarding, relieving God from these anthropomorphic molds. That is only a fragment and a small part of religions. This being the case, how far can these motives enter into the yoga of devotion? Because yoga is not a matter of dogma and belief as religions. Yoga is a matter of experience, and it has to take cognizance of facts as they are. And that is where the purification of emotions, the motives of emotions come into play. One may start with any of these human motives, but they have to be gradually sifted of their inferior elements. And as one approaches the divine, these lower elements drop off. Most start with some such mixed motive. But as they go ahead, those inferior elements are eliminated by themselves under the pressure of purity, and real love enters into the situation. Further developments we'll consider when we meet next. We can ask any questions. Worship is helpful for many, but worship of God in a form that is dear to you. You shouldn't have to do the worship as a matter of discipline, but because you rejoice in it. It enables a flow of emotion and love from you towards that. So worship must be something to which you look for, not a means for your progress. Now whether whom you worship the form of Jesus Christ, Lord Krishna, any of the gods whose forms have been adored and cherished by the mind of man, or your own Guru. Taking care, however, to keep in mind that he is only the channel of the divine. Not to emphasize on his human side, human personality. He is the channel, representative of the divine. So when you worship him, you must always be conscious that you are worshipping God through that form. That form you choose, because it is perhaps through that form that your initial contact has been effected. But the Guru himself is not the supreme. If he claims to be that, he is not a Guru. In the Tantras it is said that when he initiates, when the Guru gives you a mantra or a word, it is the voice of God that speaks, not his human voice. So it is the responsibility of that Guru to raise his consciousness to that pitch where he is one with God, and from there it comes. If the Guru is that conscientious, humble, to act as only a mouthpiece of God, as a window of God, yes. Pardon, repeat.
Like Ramana Maharshi using the mountain, is he using that as just a meditation device, but then he will go because of the mountain? And is that reason that the concept is cool?
Yeah, it's a nice example.
So one
Need not have a human form. Need not have a human form. No, need not have a human form. Yes. I think, it is a kind of reaction brought about by the immense propaganda that is being put out by the TM people. It is a reaction. It's not true. It can't have samadhi by repeating Coca-Cola even a million times. But the way things are bandied about, well, it just India also has heard this, but it is not true. It doesn't work. Because even as a man is repeating Coca-Cola, something in him goes on laughing. He knows that